Okay, so the Code of Federal Regulations has this list of vulnerable populations, and these are the people who absolutely, under all circumstances, have to go through a special review process. Prisoners and parolees, children and minors. Minors are defined by the state. Most states it's 18. There's a couple southern states that I've run across that are 19. That's defined by the state usually. Pregnant women, unless it wasn't about, like if I wanted to ask a pregnant woman about their experience eating at Panera Bread. That's different. Like I would just ask anybody who's at Panera Bread, would just be in my study and tell me about the bread. Do you like it? That's different than doing tests on a pregnant woman. So it's not that you have to ask every woman that you're talking to, are you pregnant? It depends upon what you're asking. And then potentially vulnerable populations. So people who, again, can't be sent to do the research, and they're at risk of psychological distress. So psychological distress can be a lot of things. PSTD, autism, depression, suicidal ideations, things that would cause somebody, battered women, domestic violence, eating issues with bulimia, anorexia, all of these things that could potentially be, sensitive to somebody. Divorce, even certain events, life events that happen that are very time sensitive. So if you were to ask somebody about the loss of a child and the child died in the last year versus 10 years out about losing a child. So these can be potentially what would seem benign can become more and more sensitive depending upon the time that the incident occurred that you as a researcher might be interested in. So more about vulnerable populations, and I spend a lot of time on vulnerable populations because in my years of working with graduate students, it's always a topic. It comes up a lot. So people who can't give any informed consent, people who are homeless or unstable in housing situations, that can be very tenuous. The prisoners, we discussed them. Children in foster care or unstable homes, that can also be very tenuous, depending upon what's happening in those homes. People who have, the list of vulnerable populations, it's long. Mental health issues, anything with an active psychosis, something that somebody's been diagnosed and is getting treatment for, could be potentially vulnerable. Major depression, suicide, self-harming behaviors, addiction, people with chronic or acute illness, because this can also affect their ability to consent. The medically underserved or underinsured, so they're not getting proper medical care. Caregivers who may be especially subject to secondary PST or even burnout. So even the caregiver of somebody who is helping somebody who's been harmed, they can be sensitive depending upon their mental well-being. So again, it doesn't ever mean you can't do it. It just means you have to be cognizant of what you are doing. So violence, trauma, abuse, bullying. Bullying is a big one. I've seen a lot of nursing studies recently where people are looking at bullying between nurses, and nurses get really very, very emotional. People who are living in assisted housing situations, people who are socially, economically, or educationally disadvantaged. So if I haven't covered all the possible topics that you're thinking about, I will. Don't worry, I got more. Individuals of color, people from indigenous or immigrant communities, people who face discrimination, people who are engaged in criminal or illegal activities, illegal substances, prostitution, sexual trafficking and crime, people who might be at risk of coercion, such as students and employees. Like asking your principal, if you're in a school, hey, what do you think of your teacher? That can be potentially, and notice that I put the word potentially. It doesn't mean it. So then we have sensitive topics. Sensitive topics about things to do with social stigma. A study I recently looked at was asking transgendered people what it was like to live in certain housing complexes and as they were getting discriminated against. People, sexual behavior or practices. I get a lot of those. Research on illegal activities or ethically questionable behaviors. Because at some point you have to look at yourself as a researcher and are you prepared to deal with the responses that somebody has. So again, none of this is impossible. We're just making sure that you're protected and that the participant is also protected. So for example, it's not a good idea to invite people into your home to do the interview. Say you're going to invite people who've had a criminal history to come to your home and you're like, I can interview you in my house. It's quiet. Not a good idea. But it happens, people ask me this all the time. I get these requests all the time. Heather, I'm just going to interview you at my home. I'm like, no, you're not. I usually don't say no, but I do a few things. That's one of them. Ageism, look at it's still going. Racism, ageism, classism, discrimination, sexism, grief, loss, trauma, violence, and being a part of a vulnerable population that with all of these things that have already happened. You're a poor single mother who's disenfranchised, who's been in an abusive situation, who has no health insurance, and a child. Right? So you get the layers. So how are you going to make sure that they're safe? And how are you going to make sure that you're okay to be a part of the situation? And this happens a lot. Maybe not as much as you guys, but job performance or competency. I see that a lot in business colleges, like, about do you think your boss is effective, do you think she's a leader, do you think she's, power hungry, how do you rate your boss on the scales? Let's all rate our boss. not a good way to maintain your job. So sometimes I say to protect you from yourself. Okay, so topics that may require a full IRB review. So there's different levels of IRB review. There's reviews that take an entire board of people to look at the study, and there are reviews that can just be one reviewer. The person with one, if you have one reviewer, they're called an expedited or exempt reviewer, way faster, right? Because you only have one person. So if I ask everybody, what color is my dress, we might get 7 different answers. Maroon, kind of red, I don't know, orange, or vote for the Broncos, like who knows, right? So then if you get 7 people looking at your study, or 6, they have something to say. Everybody has something to say. So the full board process traditionally takes a bit longer. But it's mandated for certain populations, those children, those prisoners, and the pregnant women. There's no exceptions on that. That is a federal rule. So with children, things that might resonate with you would be ADHD, autism, behavioral issues, medical conditions, special needs, psychological issues, and psychometric and clinical instruments. So a psychometric instrument would be like IQ, right? You have to be a trained person to determine somebody's IQ. And then if you really want to complicate it, you can talk about research in the prison system. Just go ahead and add it all up. I'm going to the gut show. You want to talk to pregnant teenagers who are in prison. And then you can just cover all your bases with one study. And then the business practices and bullying. So other things that require a full board review could be anything to do, I keep saying the parolees, but prisoners. Sometimes people define parolees as not being on a full parole, like if they're out of jail for a certain amount of time, and they're have intermittent time that they have to see a probation officer. But if they have to see a probation officer, they're on parole. Other things that can be really sensitive, trauma or natural disaster, in particular the one that I saw a lot of trauma around was the Haitian earthquake. That really was really tough. I had a lot of students at that time who wanted to go over there, but it wasn't just like, so, what do you do now that you had an earthquake? Because the trauma that people were experiencing was so bad. People in super high burnout or have secondary PTSD from being in high stress professions professional roles. They can be a vulnerable population. Sensitive research concerning the criminal system. So, for example, I recently had a student who works actually in California, and she has access to files of mothers who had their children taken away by the state of California. So, in her position as a social worker. But you can't, your position is who you are as a person in the workforce is different than your position as a person who's a graduate student. They're two different paths. And it's hard sometimes to say, well, I have all access to all this data, I just want to use it. Versus I'm a graduate student and I need to get the proper permissions to access the data. And that's the hardest thing I think about being an adult learner, is that you have to switch your, I'm not a student, I'm a graduate student. This is not my job, this is my research. It can be tough, actually. All right, so the self-harming individuals, I don't know, I've heard some of the studies that are here with kids who need help, but when you start adding these layers, like a juvenile or self-harming, they are incarcerated and they have gotten there because of sexual abuse. So I think you guys are getting a general idea of what can become a risky topic. And what I want to do is I want to spend some time going around and talking about your topics. And so we're going to go around and look at everybody's individual topic. Minors, as I mentioned, minors can be defined by the state. And me personally, this is me. I always encourage graduate students, researchers from engaging with minors on high-risk situations. So for example, if you wanted to, a study I saw recently was somebody who wanted to take kids who had PTSD to a library and read with dogs, like training service dogs. And then they were going to read to the dog, and then the researcher was going to ask the kids questions, and then that was it. So I was like, that's pretty, that's pretty benign, right? It's when you start trying to interview children who've been sexually abused by their mother and are still removed from the home. Like that's, that's different. And that's what's tricky about all this is where's the barometer? Where's your own personal barometer of comfort? Where's your mentor's barometer of comfort? And then, regardless, you have to go through a full board review because they're kids. And so if you're going to tell somebody, oh, I want my kid to read to a dog, that's a lot different than saying, I want to interview a child who's been sexually abused by their parents and still. So just things to consider. Site permission. So we talked about what it was. Getting layered site permission can be really tough. And what I mean by that is if you're in let's say you wanted to get from the school district. You have to get it from the principal and from the superintendent in the school. Or if you're working with the Boys and Girls Club, you might need to get it from the local chapter, and depending upon the executive director of the local chapter, you might also have to get it from the parent chapter. Or the parent organization. I know that's true with the Diabetes Foundation and some other organizations. So you need to figure out when you're thinking about your research, who are you going to get the information from? All right, I think that we should, the military. Do any of you guys have military interests in the military? Oh, the military. So the military, every single branch of the military all have their own IRB. Every single one, and they're all different. And they all have their own agreements that they have to make with the IRB at your organization. And doing research on a military base includes anything, including the air in a room. Even if two non-military people want to sit in a chair that's on a base, that's surrounded by a wall, that is owned by the military, you have to go through their IRB. And it is long. And the VA, they take forever. Years to approve studies. They're tough groups, those guys. Corrections research, that's also a big deal. just getting access. If you decide, yes, I want to work with prisoners, and you have state jails, and jails are different than prisons, and prisons have wardens, and then they have people who have state, sometimes the senators get involved, depending upon what you want to ask of the jail system. I mean, the layers go, they can take a long time. It's not impossible. I have a student right now who's been working since September, and she just got the warden's letter. In fact, she emailed it to me on Saturday, and she's been working actively since September to get it. It's a long time. And then, any kind of college or university. So if you wanted to go to Cal State and you wanted to go recruit on their campus, their IRB will have rules that you can do to recruit on their campus.